Hey everyone, welcome to Office Hours. It is May 21st, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Today, I'm totally winging it just because I'm in China and tethering and don't have like all my displays and stuff. So thanks everyone for joining us. It is Office Hours with Cloud Posse. This is your chance to ask us questions and interact with a lot of our developers. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, this is also a great place to ask. We host this call live every single week. You can register by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. And we're going to be posting a recording of today's session to our YouTube channel. If you want to share this session with your team, just go to youtube.com/cloudposse. And with that said, just going to jump into some news and announcements here. Thanks all. Oh, I'm also in China right now, so if my connection is going in and out, please let me know, and I'll see what I can do. There. Yeah. All right. So yeah, first big announcement here is somebody reported, thank you very much, that somebody's impersonating Cloud Posse, probably for nefarious means. The organization that was created was Cloud POS with two E's. This is not, that has no affiliation with us. We have reported this to GitHub. Why can't I? We have reported this organization to GitHub. Looks like they have not responded yet, but they've literally cloned all 160 plus repositories we have. And they've even started impersonating me, myself personally. I think where'd you see that one? I should, Matt.
Yeah, if you actually go to github.com /Osterman with two R's. RRMAN.
Yeah. Oops.
No, yeah, not, yeah, there you go.
My fingers are on autopilot. So that is not me. Yeah, that is me, but that is not me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I registered after 2025.
Yeah.
It looks like that's when.
Well, that's when the contributions happen. So if you show
Yeah.
that it's contributions to this
Yeah.
the nefarious clone. But even more concerning, they published all the modules from there to the Terraform registry. So if you go to the Terraform registry and you accidentally type POSEE, you actually get modules from the nefarious organization rather than the official organization. So yeah, I see Tim asked, would it help if we click report too? I don't know if more reports helps in this case, but maybe. So if you're so inclined, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. But
Just
I've
make sure you do the
reported.
right organization, nothing.
Yeah, just make sure you click it on the bad one to report it. But I reported this to I reported both of the other accounts to GitHub, and I also reported to
Yeah,
the
it's still
abuse
there.
at HashiCorp, their abuse line, and asked them to unpublish those modules as well. So I can imagine
Look at
someone
this.
might search for them. Yeah, they have, some of them have a lot of downloads.
And looks like it happened 3 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, March 2nd was the date that they were all published up there, basically.
No, that's really too bad.
Yeah,
I bet we're not the only organization too.
yeah. Well,
Cloud
uh,
Poster.
we're probably not, but the one thing that the one thing that worries me a little bit, and I did some spot checks and didn't find it, but
Yeah.
if someone rewrites a tag to point to some nefarious code or something like that, you now download a module you think is from Cloud Posse and it's not,
No,
and
yeah.
it can do lots of things like exfiltrate your credentials or do a million different things. So obviously we need to get this taken down by Terraform or by HashiCorp and then also by GitHub to take down the org.
Yeah, let's see if there's any other references. Uh-oh. I don't think that's related. And doesn't look like any HCL is referencing it, at least in other modules that's embedded on public GitHub.
Yeah, that are
So
public, but I would guess
yeah,
most
would be
people's
private.
repos are
Yeah,
private. So,
yeah.
but it is definitely a common, typo. I've done that multiple times myself. No matter how much I've typed it wrong like that before. So,
All right. Any other questions, concerns about this topic? Please spread the word. All right.
seems
Next
like
one was,
oh, I was just gonna
oh,
say, seems like we need like cryptographic signing or something like that, like where we sign everything from our org with with a private key, and then everyone uses our public key to be able to download it in Terraform. And then if you happen to
yeah,
mistype it incorrectly, it would give you a mismatch on the key and be like, hey, that isn't the right org or
provide
whatever.
provided you download the right public key from the right
True,
impersonator.
true.
Yeah, it's a
I guess
hard
if
one to
you
thwart
found
at
it
the
the
right.
first time, I mean,
Yeah,
the one indicator with the other org is just it doesn't have any stars. so
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
always
This,
look for
yeah, and
stars.
yeah, it'd be interesting if there were any modification dates since that time, and it'd be interesting to see if there were any pull requests made to that organization, et cetera, just to see what the engagement was, if any at
Yeah,
all. Any
I
issues
did
opened.
I did a spot check and didn't see anything. So, um,
Okay, well, that's a better
which is
sign.
positive, but
Yeah.
you know,
I bet those 700 downloads were all the automated security scanning tools just downloading things off the registry, probably.
yeah, it could be. Or
Uh,
or someone's mirroring the registry and like
or
they're,
yeah, yeah,
every
somebody's
time they do
mirroring.
that, they pull everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Next one was yeah, I don't know if I have the link for the other one that was kind of funny. So GitHub has come out with Copilot being able to do its own agentic pull requests vis-a-vis the same way that Claude Code is working as well. You can use the GitHub CLI to automatically create AI generated pull requests that use the code base. Apparently, they're using this on the .NET code base as well. And there was a funny Hacker News post. Let's see if it's still on Hacker News. Um, and not the first page. Uh, I'm not finding it fast enough. .NET. Yeah. Anyways, what was funny about it was just how painful the process was. It definitely looks like it's not yet ready for prime time. The developers themselves said, we are just trying to test the limits and see kind of what things it's capable of doing. If you've used CodeRabbit, like Cloud Posse does on our GitHub repositories, the feeling is a little bit similar to that. Sorry, guys. A little bit slow here on the fingers. Yeah, so if we look at some of our pull requests here, let's see, this one probably has some comments from CodeRabbit. Uh, let's look at one that's merged. And Matt, if you could find that one on .NET, I think that'd be the best.
What was I looking for? I'm sorry.
Okay. GitHub using Microsoft using GitHub Copilot to create a pull request against
Oh, against
.NET.
the actual .NET. Like, I gotcha.
Yeah, framework. Yeah, yeah. It was trending in Hacker News.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
Here's a better example with 60 comments or so. So the nice thing with like CodeRabbit is that it does a pretty thorough job making suggestions and that we respond to. Now that wasn't. These are all linting issues. Here we go. That's a summary. This is bombing on the spot here. Where are the helpful comments? Anyways, we use CodeRabbit. It's an AI code review tool, and it has helped us accelerate our code reviews, which is good. But that on top of another agent actually doing the code, just I don't know who's using Cursor here or similar agentic programming tools, but you go through a lot of prompts. You go through a lot of conversations to get the code to be the way you actually want it to. Take that and apply it to a pull request, and it's the same thing. Now your whole chat history on the plus side is there. You can kind of follow along the developer's thought process on how that thing got there. But on the other hand, now you just have this pull request polluted with, 3 dozen comments trying to get a feature implemented through. It's like chat ops through. It's like agentic programming through pull request comment reviews. It's just another interface. I don't know that it's the best one in its current state.
I have I just have a tangential thing. I don't know if you saw. I just dropped you the link for it, but Microsoft announced that they're in the process of open sourcing the Copilot hooks and the framework for Copilot into VS Code. So the TLDR there is that you can now, the reason that like Cursor and Windsurf and all those people forked VS Code was because there wasn't a way to tap into the way that like Copilot works to be able to do the agent suggestions and reading the context and doing all those other things. And then you have other VS Code plugins like Klein and Augmented and those kind of people who are presumably at a significant disadvantage because they didn't fork the entire code base. But now with this announcement from Microsoft, this truly might be like the death of Cursor and Windsurf and those guys, because they're essentially going to open up the Copilot chat extension, like all the integration points that they wrote, that's been closed source so far, and that's how they've been able to do all those things with Copilot. They're going to open up all of those things, including all of their system prompts that they're actually using in Copilot inside inside VS Code. So I think it's this is a huge step forward to truly making like VS Code like the actual open source like AI editor, like they say here. Like we won't need forks anymore, presumably, because all the integration hooks that you'll need will now be available directly from Microsoft. So sounds pretty cool to me.
Do you think there was any grease or pressure applied from OpenAI buying Windsurf? Obviously Microsoft has invested hugely into OpenAI.
Yeah.
Is there an angle there?
I think I think in the landscape, if you actually look at the landscape right now, there isn't a truly open source AI editor where you can just like plug in all your own models and do all those things, but with the unified experience of how you interact with it, right? And I think that there was a real threat that OpenAI might actually open source Windsurf after they bought them. So I think that Microsoft decided that they were going to beat them to the punch and say, well, that thing is just a fork of our thing anyway. So why don't we just, instead of doing that, or instead of like letting them gain market share on our editor, why don't we let ourselves be that AI editor or open source AI editor of choice? too many things floating around in my
Yeah.
brain to keep saying it straight. But I think that's
Would it make
that's it.
sense that they encourage more a model, therefore, where Windsurf or Cursor is basically a extension that you install then
Yeah,
at that
I
point?
think I think
Yeah.
that's the idea, and that's exactly what like Klein and Augmented and a bunch of other people are. And I think
Mm.
that's they're I think they would rather see those people um who are kind of like playing within the bounds of what Microsoft is asking you to do. They would rather see them succeed than the people that are taking their product and fully forking it and causing maintenance like problems for Microsoft, because like they fix some bugs in core, it doesn't necessarily get rolled out, and then there's extension problems because like this the extension, the fix that broke the extension is in VS Code, but it hasn't yet been ported to Cursor and Windsurf. So Cursor and Windsurf people are reporting that this extension doesn't work, and even though it does work in core, but it doesn't work in the fork, and yada yada. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of that going on right now. And I think that they're just trying to simplify the whole thing and being like, just use VS Code, and then you can drop your agentic plugins on top of that, and we'll give you all the hooks that you can plug into to do all the things that you would need to do, to make your plugin the special sauce, rather than having to fork the entire like VS Code code base in order to do those types of things. So that's my
I
take.
think it's a good
I
move.
I don't know if
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
obviously that's not all written here. That's just my,
Yeah.
whatever, my boiling it down.
Well, clearly, if your product is being forked for multiple reasons and it's not because of licensing, then it's probably a product problem that you might want to address. So
Yeah.
that's a interesting take.
And so they just had Build, like Microsoft Build, which is their annual developer conference thing, and they also announced that they're open sourcing the Windows like subsystem for Linux at the same time as well. So,
Wow.
or for Unix or whatever that thing is called, I forget the yeah subsystem for Linux. Yeah. Um,
What was the driver there?
I think they are
No
just
pun intended.
yeah. I think. I haven't dug as much into this one or thought that much about it, because it's not really something that affects me. I don't really use Windows, but I assume that by doing this, they feel like they'll get better adoption and better support for a more wide variety of things. If it's more open, but I don't really know. Maybe it actually says why.
Hmm.
Yeah. I just saw like a passing of the announcement. I was like, those were the two things that stood out to me. Yeah, I think it's just to build the community, maybe. But
Yeah. All right. That is interesting. All right. Next up is Anthropic announces an SDK for Claude. Sadly, well, from my perspective, it's only for uh, Node.js. They don't have a SDK like for Go or Java or other things yet, but you can wrap the CLI, and that's what they're basically suggesting if your language isn't supported. So Claude Code, if you're not familiar with, is the ability to basically prompt your way on the command line or through pipelining um, uh, through a code base. So it's pretty cool. And but I'd be curious who's using it what are the most practical applications for this? Just CLI based entirely. And then obviously we can understand how this is nice for integration into products, for example, where you could have like a tool like Atmos. Say you could have Atmos generate component for VPC, and it could literally call Claude Code under the hood, something like this, to produce that component. Um, what are some other, has anybody been using this in their day-to-day programming, and I'd be curious which ways they've been using it yet. Or like Matt, have you seen how people are using this yet?
I've seen two different ways. I've seen it be, or really, I guess, three different ways. Is one is for people who aren't using like GUI based IDEs that want to do a lot of things. So a lot of like Vim users I've seen, rather than using a plugin to Vim to do some of this, I've seen them doing it on the command line to refactor, a bunch of things, or run this or add this, and then they open up the resulting files in Vim. Second, I've seen some people take logs and outputs from other
Uh,
programs and pipe it to Claude, and then ask it to give a summary of the error, and then like send it to Slack and that kind of thing. So like as a pipelining tool that can take agentic actions on output of other commands. And then the third one is I saw like people who didn't want to use like MCPs or whatever necessarily, connecting directly to some other things like databases, etc., and saying like, run this, get this information, and then send me a summary in this format, that kind of thing. So
it's like a pipeline MCP, so to say,
yeah,
without it
something
being an
along those
MCP.
lines. But I've seen some people do mostly those kinds of things with it, but I haven't. I personally gave it about 2 hours of my time, and I was like, this is maddening compared to just doing it in my IDE. I don't know why I would ever want to do that, and kind of gave up on it. So I'm probably not the right person to ask, but I have seen like YouTube videos, etc., of people doing some of the things I just mentioned there. So
Yeah. I should have announced this. When you said sending it to Slack, that made me think about Zapier. I think didn't they say they came out with like an MCP, which is pretty interesting. So then you can use any of the thousands of integrations that Zapier has together with whatever you're doing. So kind of a non sequitur, but Zapier has their own MCP now. Next announcement, that's a minor one. They have relaunched Have I Been Pwned or Have I Been Owned? That this is, the infamous site that lets you securely see if you've been compromised, where your password has been discovered in a breach. It's integrated in like 1Password, lots of security tooling. They offer it as an API. They've just relaunched their main landing page itself. So looks nice and clean. Next announcement. This one's exciting. So if anybody's been done multi-region cloud with like AWS or most cloud providers, you have to instantiate the most Terraform cloud providers. You have to have an instance of the provider for each region that you want to operate with. This is also presumably one of the main reasons why people want to use a provider for each so that they can use multiple regions when looping over resources, for example. Now, we've talked on office hours multiple times on why it's really bad to have provider for each to begin with. And also bear in mind that BSL licensed Terraform does not yet support provider for each the way that OpenTofu supports it now. I'm wondering if this is one response to that common request that people want to have multiple providers so that they could do provider for each. And with this, you don't need multiple providers. You can just specify the region, presumably as part of the resource itself. Matt, any theories on this one?
no, I saw it and I kind of said, I mean, I guess I get it. Like when you have to do, when you have to do like acceptor and whatever, like requester acceptor
Yeah.
type of things, but it still seems like not a best practice to me. Like
Yeah.
the minute you have an outage or anything else in the second region that you're connecting to, you can no longer deploy anything if you have a provider that now can support or now point at two regions. Like it just doesn't see, it seems like an anti-pattern to me, but they're letting you do it. But
Yeah.
maybe I'm missing like an intended use
Yeah.
that's just not jumping out at me right now, but I don't quite understand why they would want to do this.
Yeah. All right. Any other, the only other thing that stood out to me were the number of resource deprecations as a result of Amazon shutting down services. So this was a big house cleaning release, or will be a big house cleaning release. This release is forthcoming. It is not yet out yet.
Yeah, and I noticed that the one thing it said was that for every resource now they're going to add the region as a property on that resource. So when you read it and get it back, presumably that's so people don't accidentally do things in the wrong regions or whatever. Like they don't read something from one region thinking it's thinking they're reading from another region or something like that. So
Oh, and then after upgrading, the first time you will see gifts and they're
on
looking.
every resource you have
Yeah.
in AWS. Yeah.
All right. Next announcement.
Even when this gets released, I feel like it's going to be months, if not years, till people actually adopt V6 in full. Imagine all the
It is.
modules, all the things you rely on.
I bet the vast majority of people are going to adopt it 5 minutes after it's released because most people are not doing proper pinning on provider versions. So that's I think not they won't intentionally opt into it, but way more people will be using it than expected to right away. And then they're all gonna freak out because things that they thought should be no changes are now all going to have changes because they're adding the region attribute,
Yeah.
unless they figure out a way to suppress that, like they said. So, so I don't know. That's the pattern we've seen when every major release has been released, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and then the next announcement.
Oh, sorry. I was just
my-
going to say, and then once you've done that, I don't know what happens if you roll back to 5 and region's no longer there, but now it's in state. For something like that, what that does, et cetera. So it will be an interesting time for sure.
yeah. My guess is it's ignored, but all right. Let's see. Next announcement is a preview of what's coming in OpenTofu 1.10. James Humphreys shared this, so thanks for that. There's a lot of stuff packed into 1.10, so this is pretty exciting. Let's go through each one of these little updates here. So first one is the real OCI registry support is coming. We're not talking Oracle Cloud here. We're talking Open Container Initiative support for modules and providers. So now you can actually, you will be in 1.10, you'll actually be able to serve all your modules through a common OCI store. This means you can use, for example, GitHub Packages, which supports OCI. So that can now be your Terraform registry. Why do you want to use OCI? If, like, for example, I gave the GitHub example, I can already download modules from GitHub. It's just very slow to git clone modules from GitHub. So OCI is way, way faster than the clone method or the tar method or the web tarball method. I think that Terraform uses otherwise under the hood. The OCI registry, you'll see nearly instantaneous clones because it's a very lightweight image layer from the registry. Now, the question I have is, I'm curious if they have any like mainstream GitHub action that they recommend using for publishing your Terraform modules, and what is the actual artifact type that they're expecting to see, which is kind of like the content type header in HTTP. Anyone else excited about this?
It's definitely interesting. I think I've been one who's for a long time has been saying that having your source code be the artifact causes a lot of problems, like in general. So this is a good this is a good step in that right direction. And just tagging on to what we were saying earlier is we can actually now sign and attest OCI artifacts. You know, doing it this way. Although Terraform or OpenTofu, I don't know if OpenTofu has it, but at least it would be a nice add-on to then be able to verify the signatures on the things that you're loading from OCI. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been running into slow clones and plans with some of our GitHub actions because we're using modules in that are GitHub based. So I'm definitely curious to see what the speed improvement is. I've also been looking at, can we just cache it using the GitHub Actions cache? But this sounds pretty cool. So yeah, I will probably wait till there's a GitHub action that kind of streamlines the work here.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is when you're doing when you're downloading a module, it's actually just Git cloning that whole repo. So however big that repo is how big you're downloading it. And now, like an OCI artifact for Terraform, for a Terraform module is probably not going to be more than, a couple 100K maybe at most. And many GitHub repos are, tens or hundreds of megabytes, depending on how long that thing's been around and what else is included in it. And did anyone ever push a binary to it? And, whatever, like all that stuff is still kicking around somewhere. So, yeah, this will be pretty exciting.
Oh, interesting. And okay, so yeah, so that's that update. Moving on to the next one, global provider cache improvements. So now proper file system locking is being done on files in this directory, so you can use it globally on a system where OpenTofu is being run concurrently. I guess this is good news for Atlantis users, where Atlantis is being used on basically one system process. Other than that, like, doesn't really benefit, I think, too many use cases I can think of where you're running Tofu. I guess, yeah, if you're using, like if you're tooling, if you're using TerraGrunt, maybe with this variable, that now you can properly use the provider cache.
Yeah. If it were fully concurrency safe, like in theory in Atmos, when we're doing like a tree of things that we want to go and apply, you could essentially just like spin up all the things that aren't dependent on one another and plan them or apply them at the same time on different threads, right? And then you would not be stepping on each other with plugins, being downloaded and over downloaded on top of them, etc. So, but yeah, that I'm sure it's for the TerraGrunt plan all and apply all features most likely here.
Yeah, makes sense. And yes, let's see, it was okay, they have more. Yeah, so this is the release that comes out with the native S3 locking. For those of you who didn't get the announcement at reInvent last year, I think they announced the ability to create basically optimistic locks where you can have exclusivity to a file and check that nothing else is written to it. I believe that's how the locking works. This is adding that support into the Terraform core or in the OpenTofu core. This already exists in the BSL licensed Terraform core, so this is bringing compatibility. Also interesting here, I think we talked about this, Matt. I forget how it came up, but OTel in Terraform and why that would be nice, but also not as nice as we'd like it to be, because you don't get visibility from the providers themselves, where probably most of the time is spent.
Yeah, I think we saw this in a beta like announcement before.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's good, but you only get to trace to the edge of the provider RPC call. You don't actually get tracing inside the provider, unfortunately. So
All
which
right,
obviously that's probably where 90% of the spans that you'd be interested in reside. So like,
yeah,
but
this is really interesting. I didn't read into this next announcement here. Resource management with target files. And if you look at it another way, this could be a way of thinking about stacks in regular Terraform, where if you carefully construct which resources comprise a particular stack, you can now plan and apply only those resources. And previously, this would have been super tedious because you would have to have it on the command line specified out. Now you can basically define what those target files are and then selectively apply those.
Or you can use some sort of automation tool like Atmos or Terragrant or whatever to break those things up into smaller modules and run them one after another. That's, I mean, like the only reason to do this is basically because that pattern is hard, right? Like because you want to treat them like they're small individually deployable things, but you're putting them all into one big Terraform module because data sharing among the things that you would normally decompose it to is like nearly impossible without some framework like on top of it, right? So I think that's the reason, but I don't know. I don't know why they don't just, not that I want to see the Atmoses and Terragrunts of the world go away, but I don't know why they don't just build some of that like into the core of the product, and then there's no need to do all those things crazily anymore. You could, you could just run those things on the command line natively. So, yeah.
This is an interesting one though, because it means that they're like, I don't know. I didn't know about this one, and I like seeing it. And it's because it feels like they're trying to address the problem to one degree or another. Like even in these small pieces that they're getting at. Like I think that this isn't something I would use, but for people who are down that like Terralift path, this is a way for them to deal with the problem today and not have it be as painful as it was. And Matt, I agree with you. Like I want to see them almost deal with it more holistically, like at the root of the issue. I don't know what that looks like. I've been talking with Malcolm from Terra Team about this, and hey, what are the GitHub issues that we can open up? And I think that there's some things that could be done, but I still think it's a kind of hard problem to just like share this data across different components and then deal with the orchestration problem. I'm excited to see this one though. I just like that they're trying to deal with it because it is a massive problem for a lot of folks who just shoot themselves in the foot.
Yeah. So this, I think this is an interesting step in the right direction. This needs to be coupled with something then to help what was affected based on these files that changed without replanning it just to see if something was affected. It would be nice if there's a correlation to what actual files or resources were modified.
I think unfortunately the problem is you need the data from whatever the provider, the API that the provider is talking to, whether it's a cloud provider or something else, in order to figure out if something really changed as a result. Because just looking at the resources that are created or whatever, you don't necessarily know that by changing this thing that there was a side effect in the cloud. Like you changed one property, but that means that it affected seven
Yeah,
other
that's
things
true.
because of that.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you don't know what's actually affected without talking to the API,
Yeah, good point.
which is why you need to do plan. That's just bringing it full circle.
Yeah. Next announcement was, or next feature coming in 1.10, forthcoming release is the ability to mark variables and outputs as deprecated. This is great because we encounter this all the time. When you've been managing a module for a long time, there will be variables that you maintain still for backwards compatibility, but and maybe you map those to some other combination of variables using a local or something, but the input is now deprecated. So this is a way to communicate that. Obviously, this would break compatibility with DSL Terraform and OpenTofu if you use this feature.
Yeah. I don't think, unfortunately, I was just thinking that through. Unfortunately, if you put extra properties on there, obviously the things will freak out if they're not there.
Unless you use, I guess, the dot, was it tofu extension?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
But
I
then
believe
you
it
have to
merges it
redeclare.
all.
You have to redeclare the variable block basically at that point. Just the
Yeah, you would
deprecated
need to.
part, but you still need to make the block again.
Yeah. And let's see. Key provider. Interesting. So an easier way to work with keys from external systems, presumably keeping them out of state.
That's actually to encrypt state.
Oh,
So
got it.
now you can actually like have a key in your 1Password that you can control access to who has access to that key in 1Password. And now those people can use that key, to read and write state, even if they have access to the S3 bucket, they can't read that state unless they can decrypt it, which is interesting as well. And this also means that the cloud provider doesn't have your whole state either. They just have the encrypted version of the state.
Yeah,
So
you can move the keys out.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Obviously, I was just using 1Password as an example, but anything that can manage key material essentially can be used in that context.
Interesting. What was the thing that, Matt, we discovered that you can't do with non S3 backends in Terraform? Was it? Plan files don't
Plan
work.
files, yeah.
Yeah.
Although
So we were,
has there always been a Postgres backend, or is this a tofu only thing?
No, I feel like there's always been a Postgres backend, but I also feel like it had the same limitation probably.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take us on a tangent there. I just don't
No,
ever
no,
remember. I don't ever
yeah.
remember seeing this, but maybe I'm just I just never had any like thought to use it.
Terraform PG. Yeah, backend type PG. Here it is.
Okay, that's just me. I guess I missed that one.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, like I don't know that it's non S3 backends, you can't do plan files, but you definitely can't do it with the HTTP backend. So maybe other backends support that, but maybe just not the HTTP backend.
Yeah, I had looked at true, yeah. S3 like backends, I should have said. Like this is object storage for OCI, Oracle Cloud in this case, Google Cloud. I guess there weren't that many other alternatives. So yeah. All right, next one. Yeah, I think we covered all the announcements there. That was pretty, it's going to be a pretty, packed release with all of this coming and nicely differentiate OpenTofu, I think. I'm excited for that. Anything else on OpenTofu before we move on? All right. Just a couple other minor announcements. We every year or so, one of our community members helps us dust off our bastion container that we are not using it that much at Cloud, but we don't use it at Cloud Posse like in our reference architecture and so forth, but we are still continuing to help host it. It is a convenient container used as an SSH container that, for example, you can deploy it on ECS, you can deploy it on Kubernetes. It includes support for Google Authenticator. It supports for automatic injection of your GitHub SSH keys. So it's a convenient way of providing containerized SSH access. So that one has been upgraded. And then the next one is, while we have supported this functionality for a month or so now, we overlooked the documentation for how to do this. So in Atmos, we support all these list commands. Like you can list all the components that you have deployed, you can list all your stacks, you can list the variables across all your stacks for a given component, you can list your workflows, and etc. What we also support is customizing the headers of what is output. So think of them like views in SQL. You can now customize how you view your configuration when you have lots of components stacks in your infrastructure repository. This is great for discoverability, especially when you have new users that just want to see the lay of the land and see what is there. This gives you those convenience commands to look and explore what you have configured. Since what you might want to display could be different, that's why we introduced the ability to customize what columns you display when you run the command. This can be any information in your Atmos stack configuration. So if you have other specific metadata that's very specific to your organization, you can include that in the output. We also support some additional flags, which I see still didn't make it into the documentation. You can specify the output format for all of these. So you can get CSV, you can get TSV, you can get JSON, you can get YAML output format of these commands. So you could also look at it as another way to reshape the information. All right, that was that. And that's the end of my announcements. Anybody else come across something cool this week?
I guess the only thing I would mention is that Google just had their whatever, I can't remember what the name of the stupid show is. Microsoft Build is in my head, but
Google I/O.
Yeah, Google I/O. Thank you. I couldn't think of the name of it. They just had their event and there were like 21 products or something they announced that are all related to AI, and there are some of them that are just absolutely fascinating, like
Really?
like full photorealistic video generation with dialogue and other things. So like I think a couple iterations of this, and the movie industry might actually be in trouble. Like people can actually make full-length feature films with AI that looks like real, and they can control everything in it. So it's pretty crazy. And
Wow.
some AI model improvements that are just like blazingly fast on there. So there's a pretty cool number of things in there. I wrote a quick summary of all the things that I saw, but it's too long to post here, but like it's pretty. I thought there were a lot of very interesting announcements.
Weston, were
Yeah.
you going to add something, or you had a question?
I just had a question on the Atmos lists. I was curious to ask, so a user is able to list the Atmos components. Is it possible, and I'm happy to go look in the docs to figure out how to do it, but like, is it possible to then list all the Terraform like resources? Like if you had an S3 bucket in there to essentially see, hey, here's my component, and then S3 bucket ID equals this, is that here?
Well, that's an interesting. Okay, so there's a few different things to unpack there, and I think the long and short of it is exactly what you're saying. I don't think is supported right now, and I think this is definitely what we enable by adding some of these new features. It's just gonna raise the bar and want
Yes, people want
are gonna
more,
want
more and
other
more.
yeah, exactly, more and more and more. But I mean, if we get feedback like that, that's good to hear. So we don't support any list command, for example, like list outputs. That actually sounds like a good one to have to make it convenient to look at outputs across all the stacks. It wouldn't be a super fast command because
Yeah.
it requires an initialization of that component in each stack,
Yeah.
and there's limits to what you can do concurrently on that. However, I could see the utility of that. It also does not list resources at this time. So for example, the Terraform resources of a given component in a given stack. But I could also see that as being a very convenient thing as one is getting the lay of the land or trying to understand what a given component is doing.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it would
would
be easy to hack together something where you just run a couple shell commands that are linked together and you get the same effective end place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as a stopgap
Yeah.
or proof of concept. Yeah.
Yeah,
Matt?
I was going to say the performance is really the problem there. Like, in order to actually do this at any kind of real scale, we would need some sort of cache layer that like stores all that information out there. Otherwise, like before you could even query it, you would have to go and like do Terraform show on like every single component that's covered by the initial filter of the number of components that you have out there. So if you wanted to see like where did S3 bucket, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 come from? And you said like lists, S3 bucket 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like we would have to literally get every S3 bucket, do a show on all of their resources from state, and then filter that to like give that back, which definitely like the logic to do it isn't that hard, but the performance would be atrocious.
Yeah.
So I don't know like how useful that would be for people to run very often, unless you had some sort of caching layer that made that efficient to be able to run that.
I think one possibility is hooking that into Spacelift as an afterhook, and then you essentially just update your cache. And then you essentially have developers on an MCP essentially say, hey, I'm tasked with doing XYZ. Show me where that resource lives and what component. And then how do I get productive from there?
Yeah. And the other idea we've talked about like internally is essentially using Event Bridge. So when state is actually updated in S3, you can then hook an Event Bridge event and then read the state that was updated and do some sort of transformation and then write that to like a caching layer that could be queried by this if you're using it S3. But we haven't actually implemented that. We've only talked about it at a conceptual level that it might be something interesting to do.
Sweet.
Why, Matt, I thought you were going to say using stores. So
that's a little different though. Yeah, but yeah.
Well, it's similar but different. So because performance in backends varies, and there's so many different types of backends, and trying to support each one natively in Atmos is not practical. Instead, why don't we have this method where you can kind of publicly export, if you will, the properties that you want from outputs. And that's what the store functionality is in Atmos. So we support some standard backends like SSM and Redis, for example. You could imagine another one being SQL in the future. I would love to add SQL to Atmos. And then with that, we could have Atmos commands work with that store in a predictable manner to list the values that are configured there for each component in each stack. That would be very performant and relatively easily implemented.
Yeah, although all of that definitely will slow down your Terraform applies if we have to do writes of like basically write state twice, like write it once to the actual state backend and then a second time to the cache thing, out there, not huge amounts, but it's definitely like another point where it could slow things down slightly. And I'm not saying like one or two values, but if you wanted like all of the resource IDs and everything else that were created during that run, like to be written like that, I think it would take up significantly more time. And then you go,
Oh yeah, like all resources. Yeah, that would be another totally different scenario. I was just thinking outputs.
Right. If it's just outputs, then it's definitely not terrible. But if it starts to get into all your resource IDs and all that, then it takes a time. Where if you do it with an event bridge hook, at least it, obviously it only works with S3 if you do that. But
and AWS,
and AWS. But if you did something like that, but then at least it would, at least that can be done asynchronously, like after your Terraform run actually completes, like then the cache gets updated kind of, what's the right word? Like eventually consistent with your, with your state. So, so.
All right. Great conversation, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll be posting a recording of this session to our YouTube channel where you can catch up on all of our past episodes, as well as share today's episode with your team if there was something interesting for them, like what's coming with OpenTofu. So if you are curious about getting any additional support from Cloud Posse, we do offer support. Go to cloudposse.com/support to see what options are available. And we have a lot of other ways that you can get more involved with our community. For example, joining our Slack community at cloudposse.com/Slack, or registering for our live office hours at cloudposse.com/office hours. That's where you will get an invite to these weekly sessions that we host, and you can ask us questions live. Thanks everyone for your time today. We will be back next week, same time, same place. Take care.